Good afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network. This is the Chat Up Show, the show where we chat about any and everything to do with your weekly news and popular culture. I'm your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen live 24/7 at www.gbkm.fm. You can watch live on Facebook and YouTube, where you can like, share, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff at GBKM TV. And you can follow us on Instagram at GBKM-FM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. Now, we know that 2020 has been a year for the books. It has been an eventful year, to say the least. There's been a lot that's gone on, and there's been a lot of uncertainty during these times that really bring up a lot of stress, anxiety for certain people. And the conversation around mental health, especially now, has become more prominent. We're hearing a little bit more about how people are coping and dealing, asking others, how are you? Instead of just giving the usual rundown, oh, we're good. Getting into those deep conversations, as we know it's important to really discuss what's going on in our lives with those around us, part of our support systems. And especially with social media and all information being at our fingertips, it's easy for us to take in a lot without actually dealing with what we're taking in. And that could really have an effect on you, can really weigh down on you. And so it's important that we discuss these topics and we discuss issues that happen across the globe. You know, this pandemic has affected everybody, and especially mental health as well. It's a global thing. It does not discriminate, and it's important that we raise more awareness about the issues that people deal with, and more about the importance of mental wellness. And on that note, we have a very special guest joining us today, founder of Gray Matter Health and Wellness Studios, psychotherapist, author, Marcy Gray. Welcome to us, joining us in not physically, but virtually in studios. How are you doing?
Hi, good, thank you.
Great, great. So I want you to give us a little bit more of an idea of what you are as a psychotherapist, the work that you're doing. Can you give us a little bit more of your background?
Sure. So my name is Marcy Gray, as you said. I am both a social worker and a psychotherapist. I've been in the social services field for several years. I do mention that I am a social worker as well, because when you're looking at coverage, so a lot of people have coverage for services and counseling, and so it depends on the category that you're in. And so they can get coverage through social work or through psychotherapy. And so that's why I mentioned both. So I've been in the field of social services for over 20 years. I currently have a private practice called Gray Matter Health, where I see individuals, couples, families, and do group therapy as well. I also have, you mentioned I'm an author, so I have a book called The Empowerment Planner. And the Empowerment Planner is actually a wellness planner, but it's also a workbook and a journal all at the same time. I use it with my clients, especially working through anxiety and depression. And it has a gratitude for each day, gratitude space, and it has affirmations for each day. So it's giving you these daily affirmations. It also has a mood and anxiety tracker, as well as self-care square to be as a checklist to be able to look after yourself and your wellness every day. So I use that all the time with clients, and then I have that readily available on my website as well.
So just going off of that book, why do you feel that it's important to have a space where people can write down their thoughts throughout the day, write down what they're grateful for, write down anything that gives them any anxiety or stress throughout the day? Why is it important to write it down?
That's excellent, an excellent question. So these are all elements that have been proven to help with anxiety, decreasing anxiety, increasing and boosting mood. It develops self-awareness, and self-awareness is key in working on your mental health and wellness. So it has various components where you're challenging different things in terms of your anxiety. If you have anxiety challenges, you're looking at your values, you're really focusing in on yourself and your wellness, your mental wellness. So it has all these components that have been proven to help mental wellness.
Right. And you can find this book on your website you mentioned.
Yes,
Yes.
it's on my website at graymatterhealth.com. Um, yeah,
I want to talk about that name, Gray Matter Health, because when I first saw it, I was like, I get it. Your last name is Gray, Marcy Gray, but also the brain is gray matter, right?
that's right, your brain.
Yeah.
So my focus is on a lot of my focus was on the neuroscientific aspect of the brain and how therapy itself impacts brain movement and brain development. So much of what we do in therapy is helpful to your brain and your mental health. And so a lot of my studies have been on the neural aspect, the neurobiological aspect of therapy, and how therapy is effective, and of all the illnesses like trauma and depression and anxiety and how they actually affect the brain. And so when I did Gray Matter Health, it's really about brain health.
And it's very important because brain health and function is what also influences other bodily functions as well. So making sure you take the time to take care of your gray matter
Yeah.
is integral. And so I want to talk about counseling and group therapy especially, because you know when people go through grief, for example, they're referred to a grief counseling group because it's better to interact with people who have an understanding of what you're going through that maybe your usual support system doesn't quite understand. And especially now during the pandemic, grief is something that a lot of people are having to deal with and unfortunately deal with alone because they're either in isolation, quarantining, on lockdown. So, what is the importance from your professional opinion of having these support groups?
So grief groups are really great. Bereavement or grief groups are really great. Groups in general are great when you want to be in an environment with other people who are going through the same thing as you. So it prevents you from that feeling of being alone. I also see clients on an individual basis because there may be particular things that they're going through in their journey, in their grief journey, that they want to work out and process.
Yeah.
So both the group therapy and the individual therapy have their different places. They're both proven to be successful, and they both have different outcomes in terms of what you're looking for to accomplish.
Right. And okay, I know that group therapy and individual therapy is different, but under the therapy blanket, why
Mhm.
is it important to go for therapy? Because people think that, oh, you can only go seek therapy if there's something major that's happened in your life that you really need to work through. So
Mhm.
oftentimes, folks who just need that space that they're
Mhm.
not otherwise seeing in their day-to-day life to just talk about what's going on in their lives and have someone walk through it together.
Yes. So grief is one of those. So it's one of those things that happen in life that is one of the most difficult to deal with. And so if you get stuck, like if you feel like your grief journey is stuck, you're stuck in the past, or you're stuck and you don't feel like you're going through a journey, you really feel stuck, that is when you want to seek help. Some people have a loss and they immediately feel overwhelmed and overstressed, and they will seek help right away to be able to deal with it and have a space to deal with it. While others, maybe way down the line, they feel like they're not getting through it. And of course, you don't get over it, but you do get through it. And you do get to a place where happiness returns to your life again, especially if you've had a significant loss of somebody quite close to you. And so to work on that development of happiness again, and sometimes developing some meaning and purpose back into your life, you will seek group or individual grief counseling. And it's always good to be able to have that conversation with someone, to be able to process your emotions, your feelings, your experience. And sometimes it could be a traumatic experience, and you're also dealing with processing the trauma of a loss.
Yeah. And there's no timeline.
No timeline,
Yeah.
not whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people come to therapy, a week or two after they've had a loss, and sometimes it's 5 years, 10 years after a loss, because they realize that it's somehow affecting their life and their functioning, and they want to resolve some things that they really didn't resolve.
So I want to talk about some other services that you also offer at your wellness studios and part of your practice. Um, Something that's interesting is we talk about like relationship counseling and marital counseling, and yet there's not as much emphasis on premarital counseling as there is after you've, walked down the aisle, so to speak. So why do you think that it's important to also offer that service to folks who want to, you know, discuss their relationship, have healthy habits before they make the legal step to become married?
Yeah, so excellent. Another excellent question. A lot of people don't realize the importance of premarital counseling. It actually, statistically, it increases the success of the marital relationship by 30%.
Wow.
And that is because you're actually going through all of the little bumps and bruises that are already in your relationship, and also planning for your future so that when things get rough, you already know how to handle it with each
Yeah.
other. So you're not waiting until things start to go down south, things start to get bad in your relationship. You're actually being really proactive. We know that in Canada, 40% of marriages are failing. And so if you can increase the chances of your marriage being successful by 30%, then why not go to premarital counseling to work out some of the things in your relationship? I know when you're engaged or you're considering marrying your partner, you're so in love and you think that there's absolutely nothing
Yeah.
that can ever break you up. But it's through the premarital counseling that you discover a lot about each other that you probably never talked about, never thought about. There, you discover a lot about one another's needs and how to meet them. So it's an excellent prep for a lifelong committed marriage.
And it's not, therapy isn't like a one quick fix to solve all of the world's problems. It's an opportunity to discuss what's going on in a safe space, right?
Absolutely. So it's an opportunity to resolve some things, to develop some self-awareness, to help to mend relationship challenges. It is successful in many things, but it is not a magic wand. If you do not consider changing, and you don't, if you're stubbornly wanting to do what you want to do, and never change, then it may not be for you, right? So you've also got to be open-minded and really be at the place in your life where you really want to see some changes and really want to improve in certain aspects of your life.
Yeah. Now, self-awareness is a word that I'm also hearing a lot more as I dive into these conversations, even with friends, talking about becoming more aware of yourself and how your choices and your actions may also impact the world around you, in understanding how to, like the tools to kind of understand how to deal with knowing more about yourself, maybe knowing more than you wanted to know. And it's kind of like, wow, that's who I am. Like, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you
Yeah.
define self awareness then?
So self-awareness is really the conscious awareness of your emotions, your feelings, and who you are, your values, what makes your personality what it is. It really is a knowledge of who you are as a person. It's really reflective. So it's looking at yourself in the mirror psychologically and emotionally. And so you're looking at your reflection back, and sometimes it takes the help of a therapist to be able to hear what you're saying and then relate it back to you for you to actually see that reflection. So self-awareness can be developed on your own, of course, by doing some different exercises and activities, but it also is a way through therapy, a way to develop yourself and to grow as a person.
And journaling is also another way to kind of take that time to look in the mirror, get your Michael
Yeah.
Jackson
So
on, if you
journaling
will.
is excellent because you can later on go back and reflect on your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions that you had at the time and really learn a little bit about where they come from and where you were at the time. And then looking at your growth from those times till now. And sometimes in that perspective, it helps you to actually figure out where you want to go in the future.
Yeah. Now, your platform isn't just about providing services, it's also about providing more awareness for mental wellness, and really having these conversations that generally in the mainstream media we're not really diving deep into. And so, what, in your opinion, is the importance of having platforms and spaces that really are about putting more awareness out there? Like, listen, there's nothing wrong with wanting to better yourself, wanting to take the step to understand yourself and understand why you may react or feel the way you do feel. Yeah.
So there's several reasons why I think that developing more awareness, like my platform on Facebook, Instagram, especially, and Twitter, is to for a couple of things. Number one, to diminish the stigma. So there is still a huge stigma when it comes to mental health and mental illness. So we can only diminish the stigma with more education, knowledge, and awareness. And so that's one of my goals on my platforms, especially through social media. To develop some understanding. So you can't really understand someone who has mental illness if unless you are developing some knowledge around it. So the mental health awareness is again to develop some understanding. Sometimes I share statistics, sometimes I share little anecdotes, stories of other people who are going through mental illness. So it's a way of developing some understanding and empathy. So empathy can only be developed, which is really feeling for other people and what they may be going through with the knowledge building and with the awareness building. So developing empathy. And it's for advocacy. So for those who are actually going through their mental health journey right now, it's hard for them to advocate. But then they can say, you know what, follow this person on Instagram, for example, and just to develop some more awareness about depression, anxiety, OCD, whatever it may be. So that's another reason for the platform to for advocacy for those who are going through and are not able to really express what it's like to go through. And lastly, um, to prevent suicide. And I find I talk about suicide in general on the page sometimes, but really the ultimate negative end of mental illness is death. And so I want to help to build awareness so that we then can see the signs, know the signs, and be able to support those who are going through mental illness to prevent their death.
Yeah. And it's all about education. You know, the more you know, the more you're able to understand and, as you said, show empathy to someone who may be at the start of their mental health journey, just starting to figure it out. And that's something that empathy, even, that with, I don't want to say like it's social media's fault, but it's easy with the world that we have right now, technology wise, that you hear so many people's stories that you start to become desensitized to their mental health struggles, and you're thinking that, oh, everybody's dealing with it, like it's not that big of a deal. And that could also have an effect on those who see it on these public platforms and see how the conversations are treated.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's better to have the conversation than to not. It's better to have somebody on a platform giving some awareness than to not. But empathy really is a process, an individual process, right? So sometimes it goes depending on your personality and how you receive the messages that are being sent out there, will determine your level of empathy for that particular need.
Now, I want to talk about the pandemic and its effect on even Canada, within Canada mental health, and the resources that were available. Like this, we saw that it being stuck at home for long periods of time for people who generally don't enjoy that had an effect. For people who may enjoy it but didn't like having so many people around constantly, 24/7 in your space, that also has an effect. And
Yeah.
some people are starting to notice that they're more stressed. I mean, there were surveys done earlier this last month, actually, by Renaissance, which is Ontario's provider of substance addiction treatment and concurrent mental health disorders. They found that 52% of Ontario citizens and much higher, 58% of residents of the GTA were very concerned about the impact of COVID-19 on their mental health. So it was already something people were thinking about, that they were worried about, that this sudden change will really have an effect on people's mental health. And would you agree that it does have a big impact?
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
seeing it in my office every day,
Yeah.
right? It absolutely has had a huge impact on people's mental health and well-being. And so I just want to preference that we're all in this same boat together, but we're experiencing that ride a little bit differently. And so some level of anxiety and stress is going to be absolutely normal. By any means, we know that there's going to be some level of stress and anxiety because it's a unprecedented pandemic. There's so much uncertainty. We don't know when we're going from one stage to the other, whether things are opening up or not. We're looking at a second wave. There's so many questions about this illness and what it entails, and there's so much to be discovered. So having some level of stress and anxiety is absolutely normal. So we know that in general, it is impacting people. In terms of mental illness, it is having a grave impact on some people more than others. And so you want to acknowledge if it is having a grave impact on you. You want to acknowledge that, and then you want to start taking some steps towards that.
So what does acknowledging the impact kind of, what would that look like? That just saying,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So some major areas you want to look at your life. There's some major areas that you want to look at, and you want to see how well these things are going in your life. So number one is you want to look at how well are you sleeping. If your sleep is being impacted, it's always a good indicator that things are not going too well. What is your eating habits like? Are you overeating? Are you undereating and losing weight or gaining a lot of weight? Was there weight fluctuations? Is it prominent, or is it just, the average? They're saying the COVID-15 or the COVID 5 pounds. Or is there not a lot of stress that's attached to that and stress eating? You also want to look at your functioning. So are you able to function on a regular basis and complete the things that you want to complete in a day, or is your functioning really being impaired? And then you want to also look at your relationships. Are they strained? Are you still feeling quite isolated? Are you able to can maintain relationships on a regular basis? And then you want to look at your emotions. So how are your emotions? Are your emotions out of control? Are you overly stressed? Are you overly angry? Are you always crying? Are your emotions out of control? And then the last area is your thoughts. So are you having dark thoughts? Are your thoughts scattered? Are you finding that you're overly foggy? These are the 6 areas that I usually have people look at to determine whether they really need to reach out for help or if they really need to pay attention and start to turn things around for themselves.
so those, I'm like even thinking through those steps right now for myself, thinking about what's gone on for the last few months. But In that, what are some tips you may have for folks who maybe aren't ready to take the step towards therapy, but want to start doing some self-work, self-awareness work as well, just working through your thoughts, because it's easy to get caught up in your head, and it gets a little like a lot to deal with. So what are some suggestions for taking those minor steps towards feeling better?
Feeling better. So number one is recognizing that things are too much for you at this moment. So if we just kind of drill forward, and a lot of people know I'm strong, I can do this, I'm going to drill forward, I'm just going to keep going. And they don't stop to actually recognize things are overwhelming and things are a bit too much. So you actually have to come to that conclusion in order to say, you know what, I need to look after things. Or just recognizing that stress is increasing. So it's that self-awareness piece, and really kind of recognizing, oh, I really need to make some changes. I really need to do some things. So some of the things that you want to do is create a circle of support for yourself. So things tend to go downhill when you're isolated. So creating a circle of support can be virtual, online, making sure that you're staying connected with family and friends, but now you can actually create a social bubble of people that you can see on a regular basis, and people that you can talk to on the phone or through video messaging, that you want to have that circle of support of people that you can talk to, that you can vent with, that you can share your worries with, that you can really work some problems out with. You want to create that circle of support for yourself. So that's one of the things you want to do. The other thing that you want to do is you want to incorporate some coping tools for yourself as well. So these coping tools can be journaling, like we spoke about earlier. It could be some exercise or movement or yoga. It could be things like meditation or prayer. It could be so many different things that you can incorporate in your life that help you with wellness and refueling. So things that impact you on a positive basis, so on a positive note, things that give you pleasure, things that you want to incorporate into your everyday living. You want to ensure that you're doing things that help your self-care and wellness on a regular basis, and you're incorporating things into your life that bring you pleasure and bring you joy and bring you laughter. And that is really important as well.
Yeah. And now, as things start to slowly open up and people are coming out of isolation more and gathering more in groups and social circles, there's also that change that you have to deal with, especially if you've dealt with grief and you're seeing people come and be more social again, and you can reach out to your support system. That's like another level of change that takes getting used to, and especially since everything's still uncertain, we're all not sure if there's going to be a second wave that we've been hearing about, not sure if everything is going to return to normal, which means also job security is another thing that's stressful right now.
Right.
There's a lot of like newfound anxiety and newfound stress that might be a shock to people's system.
Right.
So how would you suggest kind of dealing with that initial shock of everything that's happening all at once?
So look at adapting to your ability to adapt to change. Some of us have a really great ability to adapt to change, and some of us find change really uncomfortable. And so you want to look at how you normally adapt to change, and look at little nuances that you have that you can tap into to adapt to this new normal. One thing is for sure, whether you're great at adapting to change or not so good at adapting to change, you do have to acknowledge a new normal. So for example, going to the store is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
You now need to make sure that you're leaving the house with your mask. Some people use gloves. You need to make sure that you're going to stay 6 feet apart. So there is a new normal that we've had to all adjust to. So you've got to look at how you can adjust to new normals in your life now. So when you're looking at your particular routine, when you're looking at your relationships, when you're looking at your own function, what is your new normal for yourself? And even jot some of those things down, and then decide on how you're going to ease into that new normal.
Yeah. And it's all about pacing it to yourself, like not trying to keep up with everyone else. Because, someone like me who's like ready for things to open up again, I'm like, let's get out there. But others might be like, I don't want to just yet because I don't know
Yeah.
where we're going to go next. Yeah.
So a big issue for parents right now is looking at whether they're going to send their kids to school or not. Like, is this going to be sending your kids out as guinea pigs, or is this going to be just an excellent way of ensuring that they're getting their education and in a safe environment? So it's looking at what is that new normal going to look like for my family, for my children? What are my plans as I speak to my partner or as I make decisions for my family with my children? What are the new normals that I want to kind of adopt in that sense as well?
Community is really important right now, and having that support system, as you say, and have that sense of community that that you can turn to them to talk about it. And we're all in the same boat, of course, handling it differently, but there's that level of understanding where we're all, for the most part, know what's going on in the gravity of the situation, the significance of what this pandemic has brought about for day-to-day life and what it means for day-to-day life. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When you can, as parents, for example, talking to other parents, it helps. And as individuals, talking to other individuals that are going through the same thing. So if you're single, talking to other singles, for example, it's really important to keep and maintain that connection with others.
Yeah. Now, your services are available online, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So if people do need to attend group sessions to discuss their anxiety, depression, even one-on-one sessions with you, they can do that through your website as well.
Yeah, so right now I have not been in the office. All of my sessions have been through secure online video sessions, similar to what we're doing now. And so I will probably continue that for a while. In terms of another service that I offer for free is free initial consultations. So you can actually go to my website, Gray Matter Health, so GRAY Matter Health, and you can actually book your own consultation appointment, and you can get a free initial consultation just to talk about whatever it is you'd like to talk about, or to see if therapy is for you, or if you have any questions about what your situation is or what you're going through. You can book a free initial consultation through the website. And alternatively, people can always contact me through Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or by email at info@graymatterhealth.com.
Great. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. When we're back, we're going to continue our conversation with Marcy Gray. So stay tuned. Do you believe you could host an entertaining, engaging, and thoughtful weekly show? Or are you a business person or entrepreneur interested in building a brand for yourself? Can you connect with an audience and have strong social media skills? If so, the GBKM network would love to invite you to join our team. We're looking for driven, genuine folks who are willing to work hard as an independent broadcaster. If this sounds like you, come join our team. For more information, email your resume to career@gbkm.fm. That is career, career@gbkm.fm. It's time to turn your passion into a career. Do you believe... Welcome back to the Chat Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Oloidi, and we are joined today by Marcy Gray, who is the founder of Gray Matter Health, a psychotherapist, author, and we've just been talking about dealing with mental health and all the changes that the pandemic has brought about. But within that conversation, there's also the conversation of the protests that have been happening, the Black Lives Matter protest, and just around mental health and all of what we see on social media. We see a lot of graphic content when to do with the protests, the brutality, and that can really have an impact on your mental health and how you're feeling. And so what would you suggest when we're feeling almost like stimulated by all of this violence, essentially.
Yes. So I've done a lot of work recently on racial trauma, a lot of speaking engagements as well on racial trauma, on how to be an ally, on how to deal with negative news in the news. So you can see my page for some of those in terms of how to deal with racial trauma or negative news in the news. But in general, I'd say racial trauma. So, racial trauma is race based trauma, and it can be secondary trauma. So, it can be based on you seeing things that are traumatic for other people. So, great example is the video of George Floyd. I personally did not watch the video because I
Yeah.
found it very difficult to watch all the way through. And so watching some of those things can actually really be traumatic for a lot of people. So you do want to be careful with all the images and all the negativity that you expose yourself to, especially if you know it's going to impact your mood or you're already struggling with mood or anxiety. So yeah, the protests have been cathartic for some people, have been because they've been peaceful protests for the most part within Canada and the GTA, have been helpful for a lot of people to be able to express themselves in a positive way, to be able to release some tension and some frustration that they've had over some of the incidents that have been occurring and over their own personal experience with racism. So that has been helpful for a lot of people. You just want to be mindful of your exposure to the negativity and the exposure to the news and your exposure to some of the images that are out there of racism or of other people's experience with being killed or police brutality or etc. Just be mindful of how that impacts you and how that has an impact on your view of the world. Your worldview can really end up being really quite negative or tainted. So you just want to be mindful of that and be to be able to insert some positivity and some positive values is really looking at forward thinking, looking at hope, and looking at what does this mean for this time that we're living in.
Yeah.
So this could really very well mean a revolutionary period of change. It can very well mean that this we're watching the society become more aware of racism and of injustice in that many communities have been facing for so many years. And a lot of the times change begins with awareness. So it
Yeah.
can be a really optimistic time to be able to consider the fact that society may be at the cusp of change.
Yeah. And I mean, that this is a conversation that I've been seeing happen a lot on social media. It's knowing when to kind of take a step back, if you feel that you're seeing too much that's really having an effect on you and you're starting to feel hopeless. Because hope is a very big word now, and it's something that I personally have been thinking about a lot, like holding on to what I'm hopeful for in the future, because there's a lot going on and it's easy to start to slip into that space where you start to lose hope. So I know that would you recommend journaling is one thing that can really help you to kind of hold on to the positive side of things if you feel that there's too much negative outside influence?
So journaling can sometimes getting the feelings out on paper is a positive way of expressing those emotions. So if that's what you're using journaling for, that can be a positive thing. But you can certainly be using it in a negative way, like spewing hate and spewing a lot of negativity out on the page. And sometimes that's a way of processing, but you also just want to be mindful of where you're going with that afterwards. So are you bringing that to a place of positivity at the end of it? Are you looking at what are the hopes and dreams that I have for this time? What are the things that I'm hoping to get out of this? What are the things that I can do to begin to heal for myself or for my community?
Right. And so racial-based trauma is something that, you don't realize that you're holding on to because you're thinking this is, how life has been, so maybe it's not as traumatic. And so, how do you then begin to work through the new realization, if you will, that yes, this is trauma and that could have a big effect on you as well?
Yeah, so you you take your time with your healing. So acknowledging what you have gone through personally is really important, and then taking time to go through your healing and taking some healing steps for yourself. So that can mean various things to various people, and it also depends on what your experience was. One of the terms that I bring up that's really quite difficult to kind of inhale for people is the idea of forgiveness. So if you've had someone, your own perpetrator in your life who has, you've experienced racism or some race based injustice, how do you heal to get to a place where you're considering forgiveness and where you're then considering using your experience to then make the world a better place?
Now, I want to kind of jump back to our conversation of awareness. And recently, we've sort of had the conversation around Kanye West's mental health status, if you will. And a
Yeah.
lot of the language that's used to describe what's going on, it's he's crazy, he's weird, this is insane. So there's a lot of language that's being used that isn't necessarily showing empathy or compassion. And that's kind of a trend in how we deal with mental health, especially in the media. Like I'm not a therapist. I do not have a degree in psychology or psychotherapy, but everyone has an opinion on things, and that also the language we use also plays into the stigma of mental health. Would you
Mhm.
agree?
It absolutely plays into that stigma. Words like crazy, lazy, insane, all kinds of words just feed right into the stigma of mental illness. And unfortunately, we're seeing the negative sides of Kanye West and his experiences. Certainly, manic episodes are not the best, are not him putting his best foot forward. Rarely get to see when he is, because that doesn't make the news.
Yeah.
So what makes the news is when you're, or when you're almost looking at reinforcing some of the stereotypes of mental illness, unfortunately. In our personal lives, we hear things like get over it, it's not that
Yeah.
serious, or man up, or all these terms that then actually compound the stigma for those who are going through mental illness. They actually start to internalize the stigma, and then they start to feel worse about themselves. So we want to look at experiences like Kanye West experiences, with some empathy, and really try to understand that mental illness has its various facets of ups and downs, where people are not at their best when they are experiencing episodes or when they are in a declined state. It is not when they're at their best, and unfortunately, media tends to play up on when people are not at their best, and they're not really necessarily going to demonstrate when people are doing
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And do you then think that the media takes mental health seriously, or is it still, or even society at large? Do you think we're starting
Yeah.
to see the seriousness of and the importance of taking care of your mental health?
So I wouldn't blanket it to say all of society doesn't care or all of society definitely cares. I think we are seeing both, for sure. There are great things that happen, like Bell Let's Talk, that brings out some really positive awareness. There are some celebrities who are working on mental health campaigns. So there are so many positive things that are happening in terms of mental health awareness that I think is excellent. There's celebrities who we think look normal, who are coming out and saying, hey, I have bipolar disorder, or hey, I suffer with depression, or hey, I have OCD. And that's one of the best testimonials when we see what we think is normal people coming out and sharing their experiences with their mental health journey. And so that we realize that it really can happen to everybody or anybody. It is not this crazy person or this lazy person or this outrageous person or those people. It really can be happening right now to your family member, and you don't know it because they've hidden it because of the stigma on mental illness.
So then, with that in mind, if it is, how do you then support a family member who you see during this time is kind of changed behaviorally, and you don't want to come off like, what's wrong with you? Why are you being weird? Type of thing.
Isn't that the way that people tend to?
I mean, I've heard it.
Yeah, exactly. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you really want to ask, or just sometimes it's asking questions, but a lot of time, what the statement that I always encourage is, I have noticed. So I've noticed this and this behavior, and I was just wondering about it. So I've noticed that you have not been coming to our family gatherings for a long time. Is everything okay? Or I've noticed that you've been really angry lately and have been, throwing things and hitting the wall. Is everything okay? So kind of pointing out the behaviors that you're noticing, and asking if everything's okay or how can you help. Those are the kinds of ways in which you can be approaching the subject.
Yeah. So not coming at it like, why are you being so strange? What's going on with you? More of a, I'm here to support, like a lending an ear, if you will.
Right, because who wants to be called weird or strange? It's the judgment has already come, and so if you already feel like you're being judged, you don't feel like it's a safe space necessarily to be able to share.
Yeah. But then it's also important protecting yourself when you are, quote unquote, the therapist friend or the person in the family that like everyone goes to with all of their problems, and they feel that they can just vent to you.
Right.
How can you then be able to take whatever they've dumped on you on, but then also release it so that you can deal with your own stuff?
Right. So recognizing that you are that person that is always the go-to person, maybe you don't want to be that person. And you want to set up some boundaries for yourself. So maybe you do like to be that person, but then you also need to have some balance for yourself. So you're looking at whether it's boundaries that you need to set up, or is it balance that you need to have. So balance would be looking at, well, I'm always, listening to XYZ person, or I'm always trying to help this person and I'm actually worn out, completely worn out and done. And boundaries would be setting up for yourself, well, I'm going to help them on this day at this particular time, and then that's it. Or say no, and being okay with saying no sometimes, which for some people who are caring and loving and want to be there all the time, saying no sometimes is very difficult. But it's setting up some boundaries for yourself, for your own self-care.
So a lot of it is just recognizing what the situation is, and then you can begin to take those steps to figuring it out, whether you're the one that's dealing with mental health changes, or if someone you know is going through those changes, or if you are just feeling like there's an overload of other people venting to you as well. It's important the first step is recognizing that there's something to talk about, if you will.
Yeah, so definitely the first step is recognizing in yourself that there are things that you need to adjust in your life, that things are not working anymore, that perhaps they served you at a time in your past, and now you realize that they're no longer serving you. Sometimes people work on trying to mend a relationship by being there for that person and being there for that person, and realizing that it's futile, it's not working. And so recognizing that things are not working is really important, and then realizing that you do need to make a change. So again, it might be setting up some boundaries for yourself to protect yourself emotionally. And sometimes it's even a matter of gaining some self confidence in who you are. A lot of the times, when you're not confident in who you are, or you're struggling with your self esteem, you just want to be that nice person for other people so that nobody doesn't dislike you. And so, again, it's recognizing that self esteem issue and realizing that you can work on gaining some self esteem and gaining some self confidence, so that you can then set some boundaries for yourself. And that will also help you to work on your mental wellness in general.
Now, speaking of self-esteem, that's something that, you know, for so long you're talking to teenagers. You're like, it's important not to give in to peer pressure. It's important to really think of your self-image and have a positive self-image. But in this world where everything is online and all this information is at your fingertips, self-esteem and self-image is meshing with an ideal image, if you will, that you're seeing on social media, that you're seeing presented in everyday life, you know, in adverts. It's not on TV. It's not only on TV anymore. It's everywhere we go, we see images of what we, quote unquote, should be like. And so what would you say, like, taking the steps to work on yourself while also still being connected to the world around you, because you don't want to completely disconnect?
Yeah. So a lot of the times we're looking at these perfect images of these perfect celebrities or people that we follow, these influencers, and we're thinking, I just want to be that perfect person. Or if I was like that person, then I would have a much happier life. You don't even know that person, and you don't really know their struggles. You don't know the negative things that they have to deal with. And they could even be dealing with parts of their own self confidence and self worth.
Yeah.
So, really take all those images with a grain of salt and realize that they are who they are and they've got their own struggles. But you are the whole and beautiful person who you are, and we don't need another one of them. We need you to be you. So, some of the things that I would encourage those who are looking at building their self worth or self esteem is 10 things, looking at 10 things that you love about yourself. So, some people will say, well, I don't like anything about myself. Well, try really hard. Is it your eyes? Is it your hair? Is it your nose? Is there anything that you can say that you love about yourself? And if you're having difficulty, then ask a friend or someone who loves you. What do you love about me? What are the things that you see in me that are great? And find 10 things and speak to more than one person if you're really finding it difficult. But come up with 10 things that you love about yourself. Also, come up with 10 skills that you possess. So things that you know that you can do. So people say, well, I can't do anything. But really, if you were in a job interview, you'd be able to come up with a few things that you can do.
That's
right?
true, yeah.
So there are things that you can do. So it can be technical things that you can do at work, like I'm a good bookkeeper, or it can be I'm a really good cook, things that you do at home. I'm meticulous with my cleaning. So what are those skills that you possess? Then you want to look at what are the things that you've achieved in your life. And again, looking at some simple things that you've achieved that you're not even recognizing are great things. Like I completed high school. Like I sometimes it's really particular to a particular person. Like they avoid the mall because they've got a lot of anxiety going to the mall, but one day they actually went to the mall. That's a huge accomplishment for that person. And so just acknowledging different accomplishments in your life. So these are some of the things that I work with clients to be able to do, and to be able to bring out some of the best in them, to be able to build their self-esteem and self-worth. to be able to then set some boundaries in their life if that's their goal.
Yeah. So then what would you say to someone who is considering taking the steps to bettering themselves right now, who's watching this at home, has listened to this program and is like, think I'm ready to realize and take those steps to really working on my mental health?
Right. So there are so many little nuggets of things that we've shared already. So those are some of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing, really paying attention to those 6 areas that I mentioned earlier. So I'll just recap them. So really paying attention to your eating, your sleeping, your thought patterns and what they are. So sometimes it's looking at your situation and reframing that situation. How can I see this situation differently? What are the positives that I can see out of this situation? So again, it's looking at your thoughts, looking at your functioning. How well are you functioning on a daily basis? Are you able to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish? What are the things in life that you have been putting off? Are you a procrastinator? Are there things that you know that you want to accomplish that would make you feel great and would make you feel accomplished? You want to look at as well your relationships. Are there challenges in your relationships? And are there things that you can do to work on improving those relationships?
And for those also looking for your services, just to remind them how they can reach out to you as well.
Yeah, so anyone can reach out to me through Facebook, through Instagram or Twitter at Gray Matter Health. So GRAY, I always specify that it's GRAY because there's 2 spellings of gray. Yeah. So GRAYMATTERHEALTH, Gray Matter Health, on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. As well, you can email at info@Gray Matter Health, or you can go onto the website and you can book through there a free consultation. And the website is graymatterhealth.com.
And there you have it. Thank you so much, Marcy, for joining us today and really having this awesome discussion with us and conversation about mental health. And thank you for those nuggets and gems that you've dropped as well to help all of us cope and deal with the ever-changing times and dealing with this new normal that we've kind of been thrown into. So thanks again. And if you are looking to find Marcy and get in touch with her for her services, as she said, you can go to the website, graymatterhealth.com, or on social media as well, Gray Matter Health, for all of your mental wellness needs. And on that note, thank you all of you for joining our conversation today on the Chat Up Show. As always, you know that you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You know, you can listen 24/7 live at www.gbkm.fm. You can follow us on Instagram at GBKMFM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. Again, you can also watch live on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV, where you can like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that fun stuff. You can follow me, your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, on social media as well at TIS_Liz_O on Instagram and Twitter. And with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you at the same time, same place next week. Take care. You could host an entertaining, engaging, and thoughtful weekly show. Or are you a business person or entrepreneur interested in building a brand for yourself? Can you connect with an audience and have strong social media skills? If so, the GBKM network would love to invite you to join our team.